Welcome, everybody. Good to see everybody. Can't wait to see you when I get back. And my family and I are having fun in Orlando. It's nice and pretty out there today with the palm trees. And you are in class on Monday, January 17th or January 19th. And hope everybody's doing well. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to share screen so that you guys can see what's going on. And we can do the slideshow. So here's your grammar starter. Make sure you copy it just as you see it and make your corrections on top of it. And Ms. Har can pause the video while you guys are doing your grammar starter. And then I'm just going to show you a slide that has all the corrections on it so that you can correct your work in your notebook on your own. Make sure that you put this on your grammar starter page in your notebook and label it with today's date, which is either 1/17/22 or 1/19/22. So you can pause now. And welcome back. Hopefully you have that all corrected, and here you can see the corrections. Make sure that you get all of these corrections on your page as you see them. Christian responded, comma, quotation mark, capital letter, that's with an apostrophe, what I seek, comma, to be free of this heavy burden, comma, but I, capitalize I, can't, with an apostrophe, get it off myself, period, in quotation, and make sure you capitalize Christian. Good work. All right, let's move on to the vocabulary. This is your vocabulary review. As you know, your quiz is coming up. So this is your chance to review the vocabulary and study it a bit for the quiz, as well as if you did not get your vocabulary filled in for homework, you're filling it in as quickly as you can to get that done. So instead of going around the room, because I can't see you guys or hear you, I'm just going to read them myself. So for chapter 3, your first vocabulary word is carnal, relating to the body or flesh. Publicized, made widely known. Laborious is physical effort. Morality is right or good conduct. And legality is conforming to laws. And those have a lot to do with each other, morality and legality, but they're not exactly the same. And of course, they both can be good, or if they're put above grace and following Jesus, they can be bad. And then civility is politeness. Dilemma is a confusing choice, and those can also be good or bad. Maybe you have a dilemma over two good things you could do. Abandon means forsaken by owner. Perish means to die. Condescend means to do something below one's dignity. And rebel means to break with established customs. Maybe that can also be good or bad. To rebel against evil is a good thing. And Mount Zion is a synonym for Jerusalem or heaven. And you can see I have a quote down here. You have not come to the mountain that may be touched, but you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. And this is from Hebrews 12. So this is what Bunyan is referring to in the Pilgrim's Progress when he talks about Mount Zion or Jerusalem, and really he's given it the name the celestial city. And what does celestial mean? Heavenly. Hazard is a source of danger. A privilege is a special advantage. And if I were there with you, I would probably go around the room and ask you what your privileges are. And we have lots of them in America. It's a big privilege for my family to be able to go to a fun place like Universal Studios. And I know you guys all have examples of privileges as well. And then an interpreter is a mediator between speakers of different languages. So if someone in class only spoke Chinese and I only spoke English, we would need an interpreter in order to be able to talk to each other. So if this person in class, let's say it's Sophia, says ni hao, then I would need the interpreter to tell me that she's saying hello. And then I would say hello, and the interpreter would say ni hao back to her. All right, so we're ready for the quiz. Ms. Har can pass those quizzes out for the class, and I'm going to flip to the quiz for those people who are online. And then you guys work your quiz, make sure you put your name on it and circle your class time and do your very best. And I will, you can start the video back when you're done. So pause the video now. All right, good work. Hopefully that was easy. It's just like we've always done. These quizzes are what we do in every class period. So make sure that all those quizzes have been passed back in and that no one has quizzes for the rest of the class. And I will grade those when I get back. So let's go to our grammar mini lesson. I think it might be nice for you to be able to see me while we're doing this. So let's put this, I don't think I can make it very small, but I can make it a little bit smaller. Good. And then we can make this a little bigger. Good. All right, so we're talking about compound sentences, which is just one of our formulas that we've been working on, this IC conjunction IC. And we can also make a compound sentence with an IC semicolon IC, which we have not talked about very much, but you guys know how to do this. This is all review. So compound sentences can be two different ways, IC comma conjunction IC or IC semicolon IC. And then remember that conjunction, CONJ, means coordinating conjunctions. When I say that, you say fanboys, right? Yay, fanboys, which are for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. So don't forget those. So when you are making your own compound sentences, you want to pack your sentences with as much information as possible and make sure that you're using either the semicolon or for, and, nor, but, or, yet. So make sure you're getting those. So let me show you this slide. Why do we use compound sentences? Well, we've talked a lot about the fact that you use compound sentences to join tiny, choppy, or repetitive sentences into more sophisticated sentences. So as we've often talked about, if you're in kindergarten, things like this worksheet would be perfectly fine, maybe even, excellent. I might put a red star on this and say, good job. And so let's read it together. I like the park. I like the park so much. Even sis can sit on the sidewalk. Maybe something like that. But all of that information, the point is, this is kindergarten work and it's fine for kindergarten, but it's not okay for you guys. All of that information could easily be in one sentence. And one of the ways that we join that together is with our coordinating conjunctions, our fanboys. So I like the park so much, comma, and even sis can sit on the sidewalk or something like that. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how we pack the information in. We use compound sentences to compare ideas. So depending on which fanboy you use, you might be joining them or telling your reader that those parts of the sentences, those independent clauses are similar or that they're opposite. If I want to say we go to Universal, comma, and we have fun, those things go together. We are comparing them and saying they go together. And then, but if I say we've ridden a lot of roller coasters, comma, but no one has been sick, you can see that those ideas are separate. So we use compound sentences to compare ideas. We use a semicolon instead of a conjunction to add sophistication and variety to writing. So what I want to see you guys doing is adding in these different ways that we talk about. All of them are review, but you guys can add them in and make your writing have much more variety. And then use compound sentences to add variety to a mix of sentences. Great. So this is the moment you've been waiting for. You can try it. I'd like for you to write an independent clause. So like we've done before, in front of you, you should have your grammar worksheets that I've given you that say, hold on, I want to see you. In front of you, you should have your grammar worksheets. The ones that I've told you are like your grammar workbook or your grammar textbook for this semester. And you also should have a lined piece of paper. So on your lined piece of paper right now, you're going to write an independent clause. So you could write something like, I like cheese, or I hate mosquitoes, those kinds of things. Then you're going to find someone who's sitting near you to make a sentence with, so that you guys are going to put your sentences together with a fanboy. For instance, I like cheese, but I hate mosquitoes, period. Make sure that you copy the rest of your sentence. So if you're adding on, if Susie and Bobby are putting their sentences together, they both should have, I like cheese, but I hate mosquitoes written on their paper, because this is your homework, just like normal. You're getting started with it. So your first sentence for homework is going to be done. And you can do anything you'd like, but the second sentence in your homework will be about Pilgrim's Progress. So go ahead and do your independent clause and join them together. Ms. Har can pause the video as you guys do this assignment. And as soon as everybody has a sentence, make sure you choose the partner who's going to read the sentence. And then you guys can start back up the video. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully you've written your sentence. And if you have not gone around the room to read your sentences, pause the video again and go ahead and read those sentences out to each other and to Ms. Har. Good work. Hopefully everybody had some fun with that, because sometimes we come up with some goofy sentences, but the point is that we can add more information and that we need to be pushing our sentences to become middle school sentences. All right, so let's go ahead and go over our questions now and take a look at your Pilgrim's Progress. So you'll be putting away your grammar. You'll get that back out for homework, so make sure you put it somewhere where you can find it. And you are getting out your homework questions. Ms. Har is not going to check them today. I will check both this set and next week's set when I come back next week. But we are going to go over them in class today. What does Worldly Wise say about Evangelist's way of getting rid of a burden? Worldly Wise tells Christian that there's not a more dangerous or troublesome way in the world than the one in which he's directed you, meaning that Evangelist's way of taking the narrow road to the narrow gate, the narrow path to the narrow gate, is dangerous and troublesome. So being a Christian is not the easiest way. And what does Christian say when Worldly Wise tells him that he is likely to meet with weariness, painfulness, hunger, perils, nakedness, sword, lions, dragons, darkness, and death on his journey? Christian says that this burden is more terrible than all of those together. And how does Christian know about his burden? We've talked about this before. He has read it in his Bible. And how does Worldly Wiseman tell Christian to get rid of his burden? He tells him to go to a man called Legality, or his son Civility, in the village of morality. So hopefully you have something written on your paper about this is not a good way. It seems like a good way to do all the right things and to be a good person, but this is not the way to get to the celestial city. There is only one way, and that is through Jesus. And why does Christian stop going towards Legality's house? The way is led by a high, unstable hill, and flashes of fire was coming out of it, and his burden seemed even heavier. Evangelist comes and tells him that this is not the way. He must repent, stop doubting, and believe. So this, in Bunyan's world, in Bunyan's allegory, is supposed to symbolize that when we try to do it ourselves, when we try to be good enough, that we're going to get in trouble for that we're not going to make it to where we're going, and that we're not going to, it's not actually going to be easier. It seems like it's going to be easier. It seems like it's a shortcut or a quick way, but it's just not. All right, so let's keep going with our questions. So where does Worldly Wise go to church, and what is the doctrine he loves most? He goes to church in the town of morality, and he loves the doctrine that saves him from suffering associated with the cross. Unfortunately, a lot of times, even people who go to church maybe don't understand that Jesus is the only way, and they think that their own works can save them. And sometimes this can lead to trying to pick easy ways, and we just don't understand that suffering is a part of being a Christian, and it is. And in fact, it can bring us closer to Christ, and somehow, some way, God makes the suffering good for us. What three things does evangelist tell us to despise about worldly wise's counsel? He says we should despise turning out of the way by rejecting the instructions of God, making the cross or trials offensive because whoever wants to save his life will lose it, and how the path leads to death. We should despise how the path leads to death, not the easing of the burden of sin. So if you try to do it yourself, to go to the town of morality, to be civil and moral and just follow the laws, it will not really ease the burden of sin. It doesn't fix anything, because our best deeds, Paul says, are like worthless rags. And in fact, I have heard that word in the Bible, worthless rags or dirty rags, is really something foul, like almost foul language that Paul is using. And our translations usually make it just dirty or that kind of thing, but it's really gross when we try to do it on our own. We try so hard, but our best acts are just yucky. Because even when we do something great, we feel pride about it or that kind of thing. Like we just can't get it right. And this is good news, because there is a way that we can get to the celestial city without having to do it ourselves. And that's what we're seeing Christian do in this book. He has to go the narrow path. He has to go through the narrow gate. He has to go to the cross. He has to get to celestial city with Jesus's help. And that's the only way he can do it. All right, so let's keep going with our questions. Here we go. So why does goodwill pull Christian in the gate quickly? Beelzebub and those with him might shoot him with arrows before he can enter. And this is what we talked about in the last class with the map and the whole idea of this lining up with a lot of Bunyan's childhood ideas. Remember that the gate was like the gate to go into his church, and that there was a bell tower. And he used to imagine as a kid, what if a demon, or what if Satan was up there in the bell tower shooting arrows at the people trying to get into church? So he pulls this in to his book and puts Beelzebub, which is another name for Satan, up there with arrows, trying to shoot the Christians who are trying to get in the narrow gate. Who was the narrow road constructed by, and how is it constructed? Hopefully you found this in your book. It was constructed by prophets, Christ, and his apostles, and it is straight as a ruler can make it. So this is supposed to be talking about how do we know which way to go for real, like not in the allegory. We know it the same way Christian knows it, by reading the book, the Bible. And this Bible was inspired by the Holy Spirit and written by prophets and apostles. And it talks about Christ, and this is the only way. So this is the straight and narrow way. What are the paths adjacent to the narrow road like? Well, they're crooked and wide, and only the correct road is straight and narrow. So sometimes it looks like the paths are really close to each other, but they are actually going very different directions. Don't take the wide and straight. Don't take the wide and crooked way. Take the straight and narrow. And what does Goodwill say about Christian's burden? He says that Christian should be content to bear it until he comes to the place of deliverance where it will fall off his back by itself. And then we're told whose house Christian will go to next, and it's that of interpreter. And so we talked a little bit with vocabulary about what an interpreter is. And that's who he's going to come to. Someone who can help him understand the words of this book that he he doesn't really understand completely, and this language of the celestial city that we don't know. All right, so let's go to our classwork. You guys are going to talk about Mr. Worldly Wiseman a little bit, and we actually get to see who John Bunyan modeled Mr. Worldly Wiseman off of. And it's a little bit funny to me because don't we all just want to write the people who nag us or hinder us or make our lives hard? Don't we all want to write them as the bad guy of our novels? Well, that's exactly what John Bunyan did. He took this guy who really made an impression on him as being kind of evil in his own life, and he turned him into his bad guy in his book, which I think is kind of fun, actually. So you guys are going to read this Worldly Wiseman handout that Ms. Har is hopefully passing out to you guys with a partner. And there are blanks in it and a word bank. So you fill in the blanks with the word bank as best you can. Remember, we will go over this afterwards, so don't worry about it if you don't get every one of them right, but try to fill them in as best you can as you read along. So I think this is to like a front and back and then another half of a page. And then when you guys are done, Ms. Har can start the slideshow back and we'll check that together. Go ahead and pause now and get busy filling in those blanks and reading over the worksheet about Worldly Wiseman. Okay, welcome back. Good to see everybody again. Hopefully the classwork went well. Oh, and just a little hint. Remember that I sometimes like to let you use these notes on your quizzes. So make sure you fill them in correctly. Make sure that they are done correctly so that the next time you have a quiz, if I ask you to copy a little bit of it down and I say you can use your notes, then you'll have it there. Make sure you put this in a place where you can find it. It's very important. All right, so let's take a look at this. Mr. Worldly Wiseman and Buy-ins did not appear in Bunyan's original manuscript. Not until the third edition was printed did Bunyan add them to his allegory. It is highly probable that the two characters were the same man in Bunyan's life. Bunyan knew a number of false professors who might have come to his mind and caused him to include these two characters in his later edition of the book. Their most probable allusion, however, is to William Foster, whom Bunyan regarded as the man who kept him in prison. In fact, Foster, in quizzing Bunyan as to why he was trying to preach when he was only an uneducated tinker, said, "It has happened unto thee as to other weak men, who meddling with things too high for them, do suddenly fall into thy distractions." Bunyan remembered those words with delight and gave them to Mr. Worldly Wiseman in his allegory. In the Pilgrim's Progress, Bunyan also said of Mr. Worldly Wiseman, "He looked like a gentleman and he talked a lot to me." He often gave the same description of William Foster in his real life. Bunyan's first encounter with Foster occurred the day after he was arrested for preaching without a license. Foster, a justice of the peace at Bedford, hated independents and nonconformists and sought to make Bunyan promise not to preach. So nonconformists believed that men should worship as they pleased, or as the Bible said, and not be forced to go to a state-approved church. They did not believe that it was biblical for them to conform to the state in matters of faith and worship. Foster started his interview with Bunyan with much flattery and pretended affection. Bunyan later said of this meeting, "He greeted me with such seeming affection as if he would have leapt down my neck and kissed me." However, this pretended kindness was guaranteed to fail from the start. Bunyan had a natural suspicion of anyone who acted overly friendly. Bunyan later called this man a right Judas. And hopefully you guys remember that Judas is the one who betrayed Jesus. So this is a betrayer. As the man spoke, Bunyan thought of several Bible verses, such as "Their tongues are smoother than oil, and beware of men." Therefore, he became even more wary of Foster's smooth and effusive talk. Effusive just means there was a lot of it. Bunyan, Foster explained, had merely to promise that he would not call the people together to worship outside a state-approved church. Can you guys imagine someone asking you to only go to churches that the governor or the president said you could go to and that you couldn't go to any other ones? Seems very far-fetched, but that actually happens in some countries today. In China, there is a legal church in China that is approved by the state. approved by the government. But then there are a lot of illegal churches, and they meet in homes, just like they're talking about here. After all, John was only a tinker, not a preacher. Sorry about the typos. Not a preacher. You can fix that on your sheet. Because Bunyan did not know the original Greek, he could hardly be expected to understand what he was talking about. Surely then he could promise not to call the people together anymore. None of these arguments made the smallest impression on Bunyan. For every legal argument that Foster advanced, Bunyan had a theological or a moral answer. At length, Foster gave up the attempt and remanded Bunyan to Francis Wingate for sentencing. Soon thereafter, on May 10th, 1670, Parliament passed a new Conventicle Act, which made conventicles, or meetings of independent or nonconformist worshippers, illegal if they were held in a house with more than 4 people who were outside of their immediate family, or if they were held in a field or wood, or more than 4 people were present. The justice of the peace was empowered to break open doors and arrest people who violated this law. Many people were arrested, and soon Bunyan had plenty of company in his jail, thanks to Foster's relentless pursuit and dogged determination to wipe out the poor, ignorant independents. For 12 long years, Bunyan sought to gain his release from prison, but each petition, regardless of how it was filed, found its way to Foster's desk, where it was immediately rejected. Foster had one thing in mind: to seek political gain by showing how much he hated the nonconformists. Bunyan could have been speaking of Foster when, in the Pilgrim's Progress, Bunyan said, "I was always lucky to jump whichever way the winds of times were blowing, and my chance was to profit by it." Foster's cruelty and self-seeking interests soon gained for him a place in Parliament. To show how two-faced he was, when Charles II came to the throne late in Bunyan's life and changed the laws, Foster stood in Parliament and praised the king, saying that he was behind him. So first he said one thing, and then when the king said something else, he switched sides. Yet the first time he had to return to the laws against the nonconformists, he sought with all his power to do so. He flipped sides again. After Foster had been long forgotten, his shadows, Mr. Worldly Wiseman and Bunyan, show how disgusting he really was. So hopefully you got all of those filled in. All right, let's take a look at this video. Yes, I think we can do that. So hopefully you got all of your blanks filled in and learned a little bit more about Mr. Worldly Wiseman. So let's take a look at this part of Pilgrim's Progress, which is coming to the gate and seeing the funny man who works the gate and kind of getting encouraged on his walk, finally getting to the pathway to the celestial city. Oh, Miss Har, this video is very difficult to hear. So you'll have to, I don't know if the D10 board is turned up all the way, but once I start the video, you'll have to turn it up all the way, and everybody will have to be very quiet in order to be able to hear it. All right, let's go to minute 23. Oh, and I need to share my sound.
Down the straight, narrow path from which he departed, and without turning once to the left or the right, he made haste to the gate till it came into sight.
I am here, but how shall I get through? Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Who goes there? And where from? Tell me, what be your need?
I'm a pilgrim who's come from sin's burden to be freed. I have fled the judgment which will come against sin.
Well, in that case, good pilgrim, Let me welcome you in. For all who come here will be granted free entrance when by faith they have come, with a heart of repentance. Now, you must travel on down the straight, narrow way into broad, crooked paths. Hear me, do not stray. This path leads to the place of deliverance. Stay on track. It is there that your burden shall fall off of your back. But before you arrive, you must meet one more friend. His name is Interpreter. At his home, sometime spend. Now, be off at God's speed. Your journey's just begun.
Thank you, good man. On this path I'll remain till I come to the place where my freedom is gained.
All right, there you go. So you got a little visual of, hopefully you could hear it, of the book that we are, as we are reading it. So let's go on and go over your homework. And then if you have any time left, you are welcome to get started on this homework. And you have the question packet, you have the vocabulary, if people around you maybe, or if you have a copy of the dictionary, you're welcome to use that. Otherwise, you can read your book and answer the questions. And if Ms. Har is okay with it, I am fine with you working together and doing your homework a little bit together. We don't ever have time to do that in class. It's kind of a fun way to do it. You can also keep working on your grammar sentences. And let's just go over a little bit what it says. So you're reading chapters 5 through 7 this week. And you have 3 questions for chapter 5, 5 questions for chapter 6, and 5 questions for chapter 7. And one of the questions for chapter 7 is a fill in the blank for a quote. So you can just write the quote and fill in those blanks. Then you also have grammar. You're writing 4 compound sentences. Now this says to write the first 2 about the Pilgrim's Progress, but you've already written a compound sentence with a buddy in class. So that can count as one of your compound sentences. And then just keep going. Write the other, write 2, let's do this. Write 2 about Pilgrim's Progress using semicolons, and then just write 1 more with a fanboy about your family. For instance, here's examples. Christian reads his book as he walks, semicolon, he's going to the celestial city. Christian meets hopeful along the way, semicolon, they become companions. So we're packing those sentences with information. My family's in Orlando at Universal Studios, comma, and we're having a great time. We have ridden many roller coasters, comma, but no one has gotten sick. We did get a little nauseous the first day, but we didn't actually get sick. And then you're going to be writing your journal. That's also something you could do in class. If you don't have your book, if you don't have your vocabulary sheets, you can always work on your journal. What evils of the world have you fought? Sometimes these evils can be sin, sickness, or the death of a loved one. Sometimes these are just other times when you have struggled. Use at least 7 sentences to talk about a time your faith was tested. And then we're going to talk about the fight with Apollyon. You're not getting to it this week, but we will be getting to it soon. So you can disregard that last part of the question for this week, and we'll talk about that later. So you have time to do your homework. You have time to work together and get this grammar and journal and questions done. And I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you next week when I come back.